Okay, so it's 6:02, so we're gonna get started. Welcome everyone to our online Fairtrade Chocolate event. My name's Becca. I work in the community and member participation team here at Co-op, and within there I work hard with my team. Some of them are here tonight to bring you, our members, closer to the business that you own and to the products that you love. So this event is being recorded, so for those who couldn't make it, they can watch it back. And you can have a look back if you want as well afterwards. But if you prefer not to be on recording, you can always leave your camera off. Feel free to do that. And we'll be sure to share the recording later this week again, so you can give it a watch back. So tonight we're joined by Emily Pearce, our Senior Sustainable Sourcing and International Development Manager here at Co-op. And we're also joined by Simon Wright from Ecam, who supply our Co-op Irresistible Fairtrade Chocolate range, which we'll be talking more about this evening. In the background, I did mention a couple of my team members, the wonderful Claire and Terra from the community and member participation team. They're going to be sharing some useful links as we go along in the chat, and they can also help if anyone is having any tech issues with Teams, hopefully not. So just in terms of the running order for tonight, what we've got going on. So Emily's going to start us off with an introduction to fair trade at the Co-op and our recently celebrated 30 years of responsible retailing. Then we're going to hear from Simon. So he's going to talk a bit more about the impact that Co-op members like you are making every time you buy these chocolates. Then he's going to talk a bit more about where the cocoa comes from and the kind of projects that are supported across Peru through buying these fair trade items. And then Simon's going to take you through a tasting for each of the bars. Don't worry if you don't have a bar yourself, there'll still be loads of interesting stuff to cover this evening. I'm going to jump back on after that just to say a few words about a newly launched Co-op Fairtrade chocolate bar and what makes it so special. And then we're going to go into a Q&A, which I'll come on to next. That's your chance to ask our experts anything about what you hear tonight, whether that's about fair trade or chocolate in general. As we go through the event, please feel free to use the chat, drop your questions in there, and we'll be sure to pick them up. I can ask them on your behalf later on. When we do get to the Q&A, you can put your hand up. There is that function through Teams if you want to come off mute and ask your question yourself. You do that. The hands up function is in a slightly different place depending on which device and browser you're using, but it should be easy enough to spot. Any problems, do reach out, but please pop your hands up during the Q&A if you want to ask your question yourself. We're then going to end the event with a quick prize draw for one lucky member on the call tonight who win a selection of Co-op Fairtrade chocolate. We're hoping to be done by about 7 p.m, but if we've still got some more questions and people are happy to hang around, then we'll keep it running for a little bit longer. And I'm delighted to hand over to the wonderful Emily now.
Thank you. And good evening, everybody. I am Emily, as Rebecca said, and I have the longest job title in the Co-op, I'm reliably informed. So I'm Senior Sustainable Sourcing and International Development Manager, made Simon giggle at least. But what that essentially means, amongst other things that I look after, it's my absolute privilege to lead Co-op's fair trade strategy. Co-op has been pioneering fair trade for 30 years, since the beginning of the fair trade mark in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you about fair trade, what it is and what it stands for, a little bit more about fair trade and Co-op's history together. And I'm also going to touch on why fair trade cocoa and chocolate is really, really important and what Co-op has done about it. But I'll start before I get into all of that and just give a little bit of context as to why we need fair trade. Why is it important? Unfortunately, and I guess that a lot of the people on the call will be here not just for the chocolate tasting. I've got my chocolate with me myself, but because you're also interested in the story behind the cocoa that we sell and the products that we sell in our fair trade sourcing. It's an unfortunate fact that within global supply chains, there are a lot of challenges that affect the people and the environments that we source from. Within some of the commodity supply chains which cocoa is a part, there are unfair and unjust trading practices, which means the communities that are involved in making the incredible cocoa beans that we use within our products, or whether that's the sugar or the tea in our other products, it's that they are vulnerable within that global system. They're getting increasingly vulnerable as the world becomes increasingly unfair, and because of the onslaught of climate change, which has the a real ability, and also this is actually happening. It's creating more vulnerability and poverty within global supply chains. And this, unfortunately, is likely to get worse unless we all act together to support smallholder farmers and workers across the world who are involved in our brilliant food and drink supply chains. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Co-op has been doing in this space for some time, and explain why Fairtrade makes a difference. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Hopefully, because this is a membership call, some of you have already been aware that Co-op has got a long history of taking action on the issues within the food system for almost all of our history. We were founded because a group of pioneers wanted to take action of the food issues of the day. And fair trade is absolutely relevant today as it was when it started 30 years ago. And we've been taking action for the last 30 years through our responsible retailing strategy. So in 1994, Co-op undertook the first of its kind research, asking tens of thousands of UK shoppers for their views on the ethics of the food system. And the message was absolutely crystal clear that consumers couldn't count on the food industry to give them the full facts of the goods that they were buying. And they believed that they had a right to know how products are made and what is in them, and their impact on the people and the environment. And that led to our responsible retailing approach for the last 30 years and our pioneering of fair trade in UK retail. And what you can see on screen right now is just some of the firsts and milestones within that responsible retailing journey. And from a fair trade point of view, it's meant that we've been supporting since before it really began, because we were the first retailer to stock Café Direct, who then became, in 1992, who then became one of the world's first fair trade products when the mark launched in 1994. In 1998, we became the first UK supermarket to start selling fair trade products in every store, and the first keep continuing right back to a couple of weeks ago when we launched 100% of our roses achieving fair trade status, which is brilliant. So we're really proud of that long legacy. And recently this year, we have repeated our one-of-a-kind research with our Co-op's Responsible Retailing Report, which identifies the challenges consumers face when purchasing and consuming food, what your household motivations are to be more sustainable, and what you want to see the food industry do next. And we can share links to that report for those that you are interested. But that's really guided our journey to now, as you hopefully know by now, that our member owners absolutely have a say in how we run the Co-op and the choices that we make. And fair trade is a great example of that. So if we move to the next slide, please. I really just want to pause and make sure that people on the call understand, and I do see some familiar faces, so I absolutely know that some people absolutely know what fair trade is and why it's important. As I said, supply chains are increasingly vulnerable and our supply chains need support. Fair trade is actually a movement for trade justice, and it is a movement that started because of a group of pioneering charities and NGOs saw that the fair trade system needed to be created. So we needed to create supply chains that were more fair, had fairness baked into it, so that smallholder farmers and workers around the world were not in peril, essentially, from global supply chain dynamics, which would often mean that they wouldn't get a fair price, a fair premium, or a share in the value of the goods. And if you think about it from the example of a smallholder farmer, that the lovely lady on the bottom right of my screen, if you've got a couple of hectares of land and you're negotiating with a big cocoa trader, and you're in Côte d'Ivoire, what chance do you have that that's going to be a fair negotiation? And that's the reality of why fair trade was launched. It's absolutely about trying to bake that fairness back into that supply chain, provide that safety net for producers, so that they get a reliable, fair price for their products. So if the market price for cocoa fell but below a sustainable minimum, that fair trade minimum price would kick in and ensure that they weren't left destitute. It also ensures they get a fair trade premium, and that premium is paid to a community a Fairtrade Premium Committee, who then decide democratically how to spend that money in their communities. And this is really driving healthcare, education, it's driving good agricultural practice, strengthening of cooperatives, and all other sorts of amazing interventions which are supporting producer communities to be more resilient and to be stronger in the global food system. It's also around empowerment. So Fairtrade, in our view, is the gold standard, in part because of the Fairtrade price and the Fairtrade premium, but also because it's the only certification that exists where Fairtrade producers own part of the system and have a real say in how it is run and how it affects them, which is so, so important. And that is about creating a fairer system and creating one that treats producers as a really valuable part of a global supply chain. So it puts the power back into their hands and gives them a say about their own future. So we move on. Oh, and I think the other point as well in this is also that Fairtrade now, today, includes about 2 million farmers and workers across the world. And they are formed in the majority into cooperatives. So from a co-op perspective, this is a brilliant link to Co-op's own strategy, because as a co-op, we're supporting cooperatives around the world to thrive. So moving on to the next slide, please. Why Fairtrade is so important to Co-op is partly because of the way that it chimes with our values and our principles. It's supporting cooperatives around the world, and as a co-op, it makes a difference to us to support cooperatives around the world. But it's also because our member owners have continually championed Co-op to support Fairtrade and to continue to pioneer it strategically. On the right of my screen, you can see just some of the Fairtrade firsts that we have. And we can be really proud that because of our member owners, we've played an instrumental role in mainstreaming Fairtrade into UK retail and worldwide. We have a core 7 Fairtrade ingredient approach, which means that essentially we've chosen over the past 30 years to convert whole ingredients to Fairtrade across our business. And this is unique in UK retail. So 100% of our cocoa, our coffee, our bananas, our tea, our bagged sugar, our roses, and our South African wine is Fairtrade. So that means when you come into our stores, you don't have to trade up. You actually can make that choice conveniently to choose Fairtrade. And it creates a huge amount of social value. So our supply chains reach around 500,000 farmers and workers across the world who benefit from our Fairtrade sourcing. That is a huge reach and a huge amount of people that benefit from Fairtrade. And it's our ambition as the co-op to be the UK's biggest supporter of Fairtrade, to make it easier for our member owners, our customers, and our colleagues to choose Fairtrade and support the Fairtrade movement. So we move on to the next slide, please. So to just bring it back to cocoa, before I hand over to Simon for the important event of the chocolate tasting, I just wanted to bring it back to what does that mean to an everyday farmer? Why does us choosing Fairtrade make a difference? I've talked about some of the big challenges that exist, but why is it important as a customer that you choose Fairtrade, and what does that mean on a day-to-day life for a farmer? So the vast majority of the world's cocoa is grown in West Africa, so Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, and it's produced, as I said, by smallholder farmers. Fairtrade Foundation's research shows that the average farmer in Côte d'Ivoire earns about 64 pence per day. That's not enough to buy most chocolate bars. I think we might be hitting the time that the Freddo isn't even accessible at that price. But a local living income is £1.93. So we're not talking about a big difference for cocoa farmers to have a decent livelihood and a decent living in Côte d'Ivoire. But for women, that's even worse. The average female cocoa farmer earns as little as 23 pence per day. And that's despite women in Côte d'Ivoire carrying out 68% of the labour involved in cocoa farming, but they only earn about 21% of the income generated. And the other problem in some of these places as well is that in Côte d'Ivoire, women, unfortunately, only 25% are able to own land. And so what we're hearing here is some of the challenges that exist for the average cocoa farmer or the average female cocoa farmer. And we've got some on screen here that we've been lucky enough to meet or to visit. And that's why it's really, really important that a business like the Co-op stands up in solidarity with cocoa farmers, because we've heard directly from them that supporting fair trade is the right thing for them. And so I'm really proud that our co-op has absolutely championed Fairtrade cocoa. You can see a timeline on screen from being the first supermarket, and actually the first company in the world to launch an own brand product in 2000 to 2017, when we converted all the cocoa that we use as an ingredient to being sourced on Fairtrade terms. And that makes a massive difference. This brings people dignity, it supports livelihoods, it strengthens communities. And my final thing I'll say on this slide is I'll read out a quote from a lady, Kwame, who has been involved in the Women's School of Leadership that Co-op has supported since 2017. And this is a school for women that is supporting them with their leadership skills, their business skills, to deal with some of those challenges that I talked about around access to resources and a fair voice in their societies. And Kwame said, "I was not aware of my value as a woman. I was not aware of my potential." And so fair trade and co-op support for fair trade is really literally changing lives for women in these communities. So if I move on to my, I think, final slide. One more slide after this, but this is why it's really important what Co-op does. I know we've just come out of Fairtrade Fortnight, but what you can see on slides here is that we do a lot to talk about the farmers and workers behind our products, to tell our members and our customers about the difference they make when they choose fair trade. It is an absolutely radical act when you go into a supermarket that you choose a fair trade product, and we make it really easy at the Co-op. And the reason why we believe as well is because fair trade has really high awareness, it has really high trust, it has really high credibility and high purchase. And I'd really encourage you to see some of our materials to hear more of the stories behind fair trade. So on to my, I think, final slide now. So to end before I pass over to Simon, I'm really, really proud to lead our Co-op's fair trade strategy. I'm really, really proud that we're the largest convenience retailer in the world for fair trade and the largest fair trade wine seller in the world for fair trade. But if you think about that, the Co-op really shouldn't be number one. We really need businesses all around the world to be supporting fair trade, to be championing it and to be taking it to the next level. But what Co-op does is to do it differently. It's about the depth of our support, it's the depth of our campaigning, and it's because of our member owners that we can be really, really proud of all of that. On screen, you can see just some of the stats from 2023 of the difference that's made. And through our Co-op cocoa sourcing, we generated over £611,000 of premium for fair trade cocoa farmers. So I'm really, really proud of that. I'd really like to thank all of our members who have asked us to champion fair trade and have helped us make this difference. And I'll hand over to Simon now, who's the UK rep for ECAM, one of our brilliant suppliers, who can tell you a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Emily, for that fast but inspiring summary of Co-op's rich heritage in the world of fair trade. My name's Simon Wright, and I'm going to be handling the chocolate part of this evening. Next slide, please. So this is what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to introduce you to the company I work for, who you will never have heard of, but I'll explain why. And then we'll talk a little bit about where cocoa grows, and we'll talk a little bit about how you take cocoa and turn it into chocolate. And then we'll talk a little bit about what ECAM does and what the Co-op does to support the farmers who grow the cocoa. And then we'll have a tasting session where we actually assess a couple of the new cocoa chocolate for change bars that the Co-op has launched in time for Fortnight this year. And I'll be fascinated to hear what you make of them. So next slide, please. I'm quite a long-term cocoa head. I worked for a number of different companies, but I helped develop the very first fair trade product in the UK, which was Green and Black's Mayor Gold 30 years ago this year. I then helped to start up Divine, which has been another very prominent fair trade company. So ECAM is my third bout of ethical chocolate manufacturing. I'm also a board member of the Fairtrade Foundation. So not only am I interested in chocolate from a manufacturing point of view, I'm also very interested in it from an ethical point of view. Next slide, please. This is the company I work for. It's called ECAM. We're based near Lake Como in northern Italy, which is a beautiful part of the world. We have a very, very modern and up-to-date factory in a place called Orsenigo. And because it's modern, we've been able to put lots of good sustainability features into the factory. We make 140 tons of chocolate a day, which sounds like quite a lot, but actually in chocolate manufacturing terms, we are strictly medium size. But we are the second biggest manufacturer in Italy after Ferrero Rocher. Next slide, please. So the sort of chocolate we make is determined by the cocoa we buy. And as you can see, about 2/3 of the chocolate we buy is either organic or fair trade. And we tend to buy from America rather than from Africa. Next slide, please. What makes us special? Well, even before fair trade existed, we were going out to places like the Dominican Republic, and we were sitting down with farmers and we were dealing with them direct. And this was twofold, really. First of all, we wanted to help them improve the quality of their cocoa so we could make better chocolate. But also by helping them to improve the quality of the cocoa, we paid more for it, and so we increased farm income. So when fair trade came along, it was a no-brainer for us because we were working that way already. We're a family-owned company, so the third generation family is now working within ECAM. We're sustainable manufacturers, both in terms of the factory and in terms of the beans we buy. And we're bean to bar. So cocoa beans come in at one end of the factory, finished chocolate bars come out the other end. And finally, we are passionate about chocolate. We are unable to make bad chocolate. And I think that's partly to do with being family owned. And that makes it a really good company to work for. Next slide, please. So this is where cocoa grows. And it's basically a band around the equator, 15 to 20 degrees north or south. So unless climate change gets a lot worse, we're not going to be growing cocoa in the UK anytime soon. Therefore, we're importers of cocoa from the countries where it grows. And if you look at the statistics on the right-hand side, you can see that between them, Ivory Coast and Ghana, sorry, Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana account for about 60% of the world's cocoa production. So they are very, very significant. So although we don't actually buy a lot of cocoa beans from there, what happens in that part of the world has a big effect on world cocoa prices. Next slide, please. So this is where the cocoa in Co-op chocolate comes from Peru and these particular regions of Peru. Next slide, please. So how do we get from cocoa to chocolate? Well, it starts off with cocoa pods growing on trees. They're called cabasas. And in the first one, you can see the beautiful colors that they produce. And as they get riper, they go from sort of purplish to this lovely orange yellow color. The second photograph shows somebody harvesting the beans, and that is a very sharp machete. But it also shows just how unmechanized the process is. Most cocoa growers are smallholders. They have literally a couple of hectares of land. So they've only got a relatively few number of trees, and they do everything by hand. Once they've harvested the beans have to be fermented. And not many people think of chocolate as a fermented product. We think of, beer and wine and bread as being fermented, but you have to ferment your cocoa beans. If you don't ferment the beans, the chocolate won't taste of chocolate. And then The fourth picture here shows somebody spreading the fermented beans out in the sun. So that will stop the fermentation process and dry the beans to the point where we can ship them from Peru to our factory in Italy. Next slide, please. When the beans arrive in Italy, we do a bit of quality control to make sure that the quality is what we would expect. Then we need to get rid of the shells. We do that by heating them up in a vacuum, get them very hot, and then we can basically hit them. We can roast them, hit them with a hammer mill, and then blow the shells off. And the shells are recovered and they are fed to the local pigs as pig food. And I have asked, and apparently it doesn't make the bacon taste of chocolate. So once we've got our roasted cocoa bean pieces, which are called nibs, we grind those beans to make something called cocoa liquor, which is not alcoholic. You might see it referred to as cocoa mass, and that is pure cocoa, and it's very, very strong. If you try a little bit of cocoa liquor or cocoa mass in your mouth, it dries your mouth out. There's no sweetness. It's really strong stuff, but it's the basis of all chocolate manufacture. We then take some of that liquor and we press it, and we produce cocoa butter, which is the stuff that you used to make white chocolate with, because it's lost all its color and its flavor, and that's gone into cocoa powder, which is, so cocoa liquor equals cocoa butter plus cocoa powder, and those three ingredients are the basis of all chocolate manufacture. Next slide, please. So we put together our cocoa powder, our cocoa butter, our cocoa liquor, some sugar, maybe some milk powder, mix it all up, put it through a mill to make it the particle size smaller, and then we do something called conching. And conching is basically just stirring and heating for several hours. And whilst we do that, the particles rub over one another, and desirable flavors are created and undesirable aromas are driven off. So that's really important to make a good tasting chocolate. We then have to temper it, and tempering means making sure that we get the cocoa butter into a stable form. If you've ever had the misfortune to leave a bar of chocolate on a radiator or in the sunlight and it's melted and then set again, and you get that sort of grey appearance and the texture and the flavor is all wrong, that's because it's lost its temper. So we have to make sure that when the chocolate leaves us, it's in the right form to stay stable. At this point, if we're adding inclusions, if we're adding dried raspberries or whatever it might be, that's when they go in. We then deposit into chocolate molds, and they go down a cooling tunnel. The chocolate sets. We then turn them upside down. The bars come out. They go through a packaging machine where they're wrapped in silver foil, and then into the cardboard cartons. Then they go into a box. They're put on a truck, and they're driven from Italy to the UK. And that is how you turn cocoa beans into chocolate bars. Next slide, please. So we have a slightly unusual relationship with the co-op compared to our other retail customers, because the co-op voluntarily goes one step further than other supermarkets. So Emily's already explained how with fair trade, there's two basic levels of support. There's a price guarantee. So if you're a fair trade cocoa farmer, you will never get less than a certain price for your cocoa beans. And then there's the social premium. And the social premium is an additional sum which the co-ops decide how they're going to spend. With the chocolate that we make for the co-op, there's a third level of support. We have a fund that ECAM pays for, and every year we put money into that fund, and then we sit down with the farmers and we decide how they want to spend that premium. Now you can see here the picture on screen comes from the time of the pandemic, where we spent the fund on PPE for the farmers and emergency food rations for the families affected. Next slide, please. And here you can see a workshop where some of the representatives from Cat to Cash Co-op in Peru are talking to the farmers about how best to deal with the impact of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So we're just introducing a new program at the moment, funded by us. And what we're trying to do is we're working with the farmers in Peru to help themselves. So increase their productivity so they can produce more cocoa, so they will earn more money, manage pests and diseases. And as Emily was saying earlier, we have a real problem with climate change in the cocoa world. We're getting new pests and diseases that we haven't had before. And to improve the agroecological conditions of their farms, to grow their cocoa more sustainably. And we have a 2-year program, and we're working with 1,100 small-scale producers, all in Peru, all growing cocoa to be used in the co-op's bars. And this is funded by ECAM, and it's been designed by the producers themselves. Next slide, please. Now, I hope you've all been in store and you've seen the wonderful looking new range. I've been knocked out actually by going into my local co-ops and seeing this branding all through the store. I think there's over 30 products that have been rebranded this way. Chocolate for Change, really, really strong visual impact. It's great. So this is the range of bars that we're producing under the Chocolate for Change. 70% dark chocolate. Next slide, please. This is the dark chocolate with freeze-dried raspberries. Very nice. Next bar, please. Dark chocolate with orange. Next slide, please. Dark milk. This is quite a new category. So it's a dairy product, but it's got a lot of cocoa there. So you've got the cocoa impact of a dark product, and it's just smoothed out a little bit by the creaminess of the dairy. It's a personal favorite of mine. Next slide, please. Right, these are the bars we're going to be tasting tonight. And we've chosen these bars because they're in the widest distribution. So we thought you'd have the most chance of finding these in your local store. So we're going to be trying 2 bars tonight. We've got, they're both made with cocoa from Peru. There's an 85% cocoa dark chocolate one. And then there's the Gianduja, which my Italian colleagues always laugh when I pronounce it. It sounds much better said with an Italian accent. But Gianduja is a blend of dark chocolate and hazelnut paste. It's a traditional Italian product, particularly popular at Christmas time. But we've turned it into a bar as a way of addressing the market for people who want a creamy product that is dairy-free. So this is suitable for people who are wanting to eat plant-based products or are vegans. So those are the 2 bars we're going to be assessing tonight. Next slide, please. And this is how we're going to do it. So this is how we assess chocolate in the factory. We start off by looking at the appearance. We don't want any of that nasty bloom. We do want it to have a slight shine on it. When you touch the bar, it should be nice and dry and not greasy. When you break it, you should hear a snap. That shows there's a good quantity of cocoa butter present. When you smell it, there should be a smell. When you get it in your mouth, it should have a nice smooth mouthfeel. You should get the basic flavors there: salt, sweet, savory, bitter, and umami. But you may find some other flavors as well. And really good chocolate, you might have an initial flavor, a secondary flavor, and then maybe even an aftertaste if there's a really good complex cocoa profile there. And we're working here tonight with cocoa from Peru, and Peruvian cocoa is thought to be characterized by flavors of fresh fruit, especially red fruits and honey. So that's what I'd like you to be looking out for when you're trying these bars. Now I suggest that we start with the Gianduja, the green one. So take it out of its, if you've got a bar. If you haven't got a bar, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to imagine it. Take it out of its wrapping. So break a bar off, break a square off. The first thing you'll notice is it doesn't have much gloss. and that's due to the presence of the hazelnut paste. If you snap it, it's quite soft, and again, that's due to the presence of the hazelnut paste. Give it a sniff. Yeah, you get the cocoa and the hazelnut coming through. And then break a bit off, pop a little bit in your mouth and let it melt. Now what you should be getting through, should be getting some smoothness, some sweetness. Maybe the hazelnut flavor is beginning to come through now. Then after you've got that initial hit of hazelnut, there should be some cocoa notes coming through as well. And what I'm left with is a really, really smooth taste. A nice round aftertaste and a nice flavor in my mouth, which is encouraging me to go back for another bite. But we're not going to take another bite of the Gianduja because we're going to move on to the 85% dark. That's this one. Now, this is a very different bar. For a start, it's 85% cocoa, so that's quite a lot. Interestingly, throughout the market, so with all our customers, our best-selling bar is always the 70% dark, but our second best-selling bar is the 85% dark, and that's new. So 85% is a bar that's really started selling in big quantities, and we're delighted because the higher cocoa solids, the more cocoa we can buy from Fairtrade farmers. So we're very into high cocoa solids chocolate. So same again, try breaking a bit and see if you can hear a snap. I'll see if I can get it on my microphone. There, a really good snap. And that's because at 85%, there's a lot of cocoa butter in that bar. If you look at it, you can see it's got a nice little shine, which is good. It's nice and dry to the touch, not greasy, no bloom. Now, do the same again. Take a little bit, pop it in your mouth, let it melt. Now, unlike the Gianduja, because you've only got cocoa here, the flavors come through much more strongly. I'm getting fruitiness, I'm getting acidity, a little bit of sweetness, that's those honey notes. There's some vanilla in there to smooth out the flavor profile. It's a little dry in the mouth, not as dry as the pure cocoa liquor, but still a little dry. The important thing is it's not too bitter. A lot of people won't eat dark chocolate because they say it's too bitter. Badly made chocolate is too bitter. Well-made dark chocolate, bitterness is one of the notes, but it shouldn't be the whole story. So that is how we assess chocolate in the factory. Excuse me. So I hope next time that you sit down to enjoy a bar of Co-op Fairtrade chocolate, then you can bear in mind these sort of things and really, really savor the experience of eating good quality chocolate whilst knowing that your purchase has been supporting cocoa farmers in Peru. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for your time this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the what I've been telling you about cocoa and chocolate. And I hope you've enjoyed the tasting, those of you who are fortunate enough to have bars to hand. For others, I'm afraid you'll just have to go out and buy the bars and do it subsequently. But we will be available to answer questions, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Emily. I agree with Sam's comment in the chat. I don't have the chocolates to do the tasting, and it is torture, however interesting, listening along and not being able to taste it. I'm just going to commandeer the event for 2 minutes just to shout about one of our other newly launched Fairtrade chocolate bars. Our chunky salted caramel and pretzel bar was recently launched in stores, and over 70,000 of our members joined in to help us develop it. So last year, members shared with us their ideal chocolate bar flavour combinations, mouthful, with us, which were then looked at and reviewed by some of our experts in the Delicious Food team. 3 flavours were then selected and put back out to members in January this year to help to tell us which one they preferred, which one they liked the sound of. And that's when our salted caramel and pretzel bar was chosen. So our member created bar is funky in shape with a geometric design, and of course it is sourced on Fairtrade terms as well. So just a little promotion. If you've not tried it, do go out and do go out. I've got one here, but it is half empty because it is so delicious. So yeah, just a quick shout out about that. So I think we are now going to move on to the Q&A. So I've had one hand up and waiting very patiently for a while. So I'm going to come to you first. Anne, would you like to come on? Anne Shaw, would you like to come on and ask your question? You should have the ability to unmute yourself in a moment. I'm not sure if you're able to try and unmute yourself. You should have the ability now, I hope. No, I'm not sure if Anne's struggling there. We'll move on to the next one. Robert, Rob Purves, sorry, you should be given the ability to unmute yourself in a moment. My lovely colleague will give you that.
Buenos días.
Amazing. Do you want to ask your question?
Sí, yeah, of course you can. And everybody else is on mute.
Oop. Sorry, do you want to ask your question? Have you got a question you want to ask? I'm not sure. It just caught up for me then.
Actually. I missed out a bit of what Simon had done because, unfortunately, I'm a bit of a cacao and cocoa fan. So I've been to Italy a few times in my life and a few other places. But I didn't know you did Ferrero Rocher because I hate them.
No, actually, what I said was we're the second biggest manufacturer after Ferrero Rocher. We're nothing to do with Ferrero Rocher.
Right. I'll let you off with that, sir. But I do have, I do buy chocolate for change from Co-op and other products from Co-op. So it's nice to actually meet a person that actually delivers those products, apart from you girls that are working to get people like this on board.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. So Sarah Walker, I think you've got your hand up next. Colleague will allow you to unmute in a moment, and then what I'll do, I'll start to field some of the questions because I know loads of you have been asking some in the chat, so don't worry, we will get round to them. Hopefully you can unmute yourself, Sarah, if you want to give it a try.
Can you hear me?
Oh, lovely. Yep. Hi, Sarah. Yeah.
Just a question about the list of ingredients on the 85% bar. It says at the very end, flavouring.
Yeah.
Now, comparing it to green and blacks, they have vanilla extract listed, but not the sort of ubiquitous flavouring. Can you explain what that ingredient is?
It is vanilla extract. Quite why the Co-op choose to declare it as flavouring, I have no idea. But if I can assure you that it's we only have natural vanilla in the factory. We don't use anything synthetic. So it is vanilla.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Lovely, thank you, Sarah. So a few questions coming through the chat now. So first up, Simon, this one is for you from Sue Smith. So question is, are there any processing or manufacturing of either fair trade chocolate, coffee, tea in the countries where the products have actually grown?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, and it's something that at the Fairtrade Foundation we're spending time working on, because we would like to encourage this. It makes perfect sense to have the people who grow the crops, process the crops, and more of the money stay in that country. At the moment, it's a bit of a challenge for chocolate because the standards that UK and European retailers work to are extremely high, and it's quite difficult for manufacturers in the country of origin to reach those standards. There are places like Madagascar where we're seeing more of it, where there's a brand of chocolate called Madagascar, which is made in Madagascar and sold over here. But I think probably for chocolate, the way it will go is maybe we can see people taking the cocoa beans, turning it into cocoa butter or cocoa liquor or cocoa powder, and then that being imported into Europe. So they do sort of part of the processing, and then the product is finished off over here, and then more of the value would stay in the country where the beans grow.
Brilliant, thank you, Simon. Linda Bayliss popped your hand up in the chat, so my colleague hopefully will give you the ability to unmute and come on and ask your question.
Might be muted.
Hi, Linda. On your screen where the mute and unmute button wasn't working before, it should now work for you. So if you give that a go, there we go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ah, lovely. Right, couple of things I wanted to say. It bothers me how overpacked the chocolate is. I don't think there's any need for a cardboard, for all this cardboard.
Right. Can I answer that?
Yeah, because it is only 100 grams worth of chocolate in there, and it just seems very wasteful. I mean, obviously I recycle, but I think not so much there in the first place would be better.
Right. So the reason we package our chocolate the way we do is it needs to be wrapped in foil to keep the product quality there. Yeah. We need to have something that keeps out oxygen and stops flavors mingling and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, the 100-gram bar is too thin on its own unless you put it in cardboard. Well, be delighted to. I'd be delighted to do a 200-gram bar. So we have to put it in cardboard because otherwise it would break, and people don't like buying broken bars of chocolate.
Oh, mine was already broken when I opened it.
So nothing's perfect. But
no, both bars were partially broken, and I only bought them this afternoon.
What I would say is that the new bar, the new member created bar, it's in a cardboard carton, but it doesn't have the inner foil. So that's only got one packaging element.
But I wouldn't eat that. Okay. I don't like the thought of pretzels in chocolate. Ugh. But obviously it is popular because from what you said about the sales you've had so far on that, I'm obviously in a slight minority.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, well, the 85% is just too strong, but it's excellent for cooking with. So I've nothing against 85% chocolate. And when I was tasting the Guy and Jula one, I found when it started to melt, I actually had quite an alcoholic alcohol sort of flavour.
Oh, okay.
Well, not flavour, but sort of, feeling.
Yeah.
So well, I just thought I'd let you know that, but it might be my weird taste buds.
Well, there's certainly no alcohol in the product.
No.
But yeah, everyone does perceive these products as slightly different.
So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know it was,
thank you very much.
Not unpleasant, but not something I've noticed when I've been eating chocolate before, unless of course it's had, unless it's been an alcoholic chocolate.
Sure. Okay, well that's interesting feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
Next up, we've got a question from Daphne D'Souza. So that's, do the farmers receive the same payment if they don't meet the quality or hygiene standards?
Emily, do you want to do that one?
I will be honest, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to go away and answer that. But Simon, do you know?
Yeah, so we have quality standards on our beans. And the reason we have quality standards is there's no use us bringing a 20-ton container of cocoa beans all the way from Peru to Italy and then reject it. That doesn't help anyone. So what we do is in Peru, we have quality control that looks at the beans, and we do more quality control when the products arrive in Italy. But in Peru, we go through the beans and we cut them in half, and we look at the quality of the bean. We look at the color, we look at the size, we look for infestation, we look at weird shapes. So we do a couple of chemical checks as well. So before the beans ship from Peru to Italy, we know the quality is okay. The co-ops will actually be sorting through the beans to give us the quality we need. Now, I said earlier that we're bean to bar. So it does mean we have a bit of flexibility in processing. So if, for example, we get a batch of beans in, the flavor's a little, perhaps it isn't as strong as we'd like, we can roast them for a little longer to develop more cocoa flavor. So we can actually accept a slightly wider quality variation than most manufacturers can accept. But we're absolutely clear we have to have minimum standards for quality and flavor, because otherwise we end up rejecting the beans or we make bad chocolate, and neither of those are good things.
Thank you, Simon. That's really interesting. So another question, keep them coming fast, from Beatrice. So is there a particular reason why you buy cocoa more from America rather than from Ivory Coast or Ghana, who grow about 60% of all cocoa grown in the world?
There absolutely
and there is a part two. Sorry,
okay, well, I'll do part one first. There absolutely is. We buy something called fine flavor cocoa, which is about 8 to 12% of the world's cocoa production. Fine flavor cocoa is cocoa where it's thought that the country where it grows affects the flavor. So I said earlier with Peruvian cocoa, it is thought that the cocoa has red berry notes with a little bit of honey. That's true of a variety of other countries like Dominican Republic, Ecuador, a variety of other producers. They tend not to be in Africa. The cocoa that comes out of Africa is perfectly good quality and makes perfectly good chocolate, but it doesn't have that distinctive flavor. And we have set up our business in order to do this single origin fine flavor cocoa production. So for us, it's a quality thing. We want to offer that quality of chocolate. Nothing wrong with anything that isn't fine flavor cocoa, but it's not the way we've built our business. Now, what was part two?
Part two was directed to Emily to say, do Co-op buy cocoa from any of the other places?
Yes, so thanks for the question. Yes, as Simon said, our Irresistible Chocolate, so our kind of highest tier of chocolate in store, is all Peruvian, so through IKEA. But the rest of the cocoa that we source, because obviously we use cocoa in a number of other products, and in our Pioneer, our kind of standard tier chocolate range, in our kind of biscuits, all of these different areas we'll be sourcing from, majority will be from West Africa. So we're sourcing from, obviously that's really important because we're supporting producer communities around the world. But yeah, so that's probably the answer to that, Rebecca.
Lovely, thank you. Another question for you, Emily. This is from Mary. So Mary said, proud as a member that all Co-op does to support fair trade. My admittedly small local Co-op stocks fair trade chocolate, wine, bananas and tea, which I love to buy, but all the coffee and cocoa stocked there are non-fair trade big brands. Is there a reason for this? Could Co-op commit to selling at least one Co-op own brand fair trade product in all stores where you stock the big 7 products?
Well, actually, we do. If you look at our annual sustainability report, which I would obviously encourage everyone to read, we do actually have KPIs around what we call the minimum credible range, which is saying that basically in a certain number of our stores that we ensure that there is a good selection of fair trade products that are available. Sometimes, obviously, that's not possible if there's a particular issue or something like that, but essentially we do try and prioritize that there is a really good minimum range of fair trade products that are available all year round. Obviously, some products are seasonal, like chocolate products and things like that will come and go, but it is unusual that you've gone into a store and they don't have a fair trade coffee. I'm quite surprised by that. So I would either think that it might be that there was a particular issue as to why that was the case, which would no doubt have been resolved. But if it's an ongoing thing, I would contact your customer services or Co-op's customer services, ask that that's rectified, and I'm sure our buying teams will be keen to serve our customers in those communities. The only other thing I'd say is obviously we do wholesale fair trade products into independent societies. So it hasn't said, but just it might be that wasn't actually a Co-op, a cooperative group store. So but again, if you contact them direct, they should be able to stock our products.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Emily. So we have got a few more questions to answer, but I'm just conscious it's nearly 7 o'clock. Now we are going to keep it going for a little bit longer. If people do have time and want to keep sort of hanging around, obviously we'll continue to record it. But without further ado, we have done the prize draw in the background, and I'm pleased to announce that the winner of Fairtrade Chocolate Goodies is Mary Duckworth. So Mary, we will drop you an email following the event just regarding you getting your prize. Big congratulations. Very jealous. And yeah, so as I said, if you kind of have places to go, people to see, please do sort of, leave the event. But we will keep going for a little bit longer, probably for about another 15 minutes. We've got a handful of questions to get through, if that's all right. And Emily and Simon don't mind giving us a little bit more of their time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
This next question comes from Fiona Jarrett. So, large-scale cocoa farming can be environmentally damaging. Are the small-scale farmers supported to grow in an environmentally sensitive way to promote biodiversity and support the local ecosystem?
Emily, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll come into that. So all fair trade producers need to meet fair trade standards. And those standards cover social, environmental, and governance kind of standards, and they'll be audited against those standards. And they're pretty stringent and trying to support producers, obviously, because as a purchaser of fair trade goods, you want to make sure that you're buying a product that does it's what it says on the tin, and it is supporting producers, but it's also having a positive impact on the environment. So those standards are consulted and strengthened on a very regular basis, and the consultations involve producer communities, but it also involves the likes of retailers and brands, and also the best practice that exists. And then the producer network, so the fair trade system also has producer networks that are based in the continents where producers are. So you have Fairtrade Africa, you have the CLAC in Latin America, and you have the NAP in Asia Pacific. And the producer networks, part of their role is to support producers in any changes to the standards, in maintaining the standards. And you also have FlowCert, who are the independent auditor of Fairtrade, that also will be auditing producer communities against those standards and dealing if there is a case where something can't be maintained. So a good example of environmental issues is obviously deforestation, which is a big issue in cocoa and coffee. And Fairtrade is doing a lot to work with producer communities on meeting deforestation standards and supporting them on the ground to meet, the increasing regulation we're seeing there, but also that they're having a beneficial impact on the ground. And the project that Simon talked about earlier, the PIP program that we'll be funding with them, is also about supporting them with their productivity and their livelihoods. So some of the issues that can happen with producer communities leading to deforestation is that potentially the producer doesn't have the farming knowledge to kind of have good agricultural techniques, so that they don't know about how to make the most out of their yields and be the most productive, and so they might cut down other land or convert other land. So a lot of what happens on the ground is to support producers to basically farm better, so they're more productive, so their livelihoods are better. And there's a lot of work that's going on, because I saw another question about climate change and how that's impacting. There's a lot of work going on to support producers to be more resilient against climate change. And a lot of that is about better farming. So it's about not having a monoculture, so just one crop on the land. It's about planting shade trees that can protect the cocoa trees or the coffee trees. It's about having more less pesticide use. It's about working with organic fertilizers. There's a huge amount that the Fairtrade system does, but then also people like the Co-op and people like ECAM do on top to support producer communities to farm better and have more resilient livelihoods as well. Because the other benefit of that is if you have other types of tree on your farm, so I've seen macadamia nuts or bananas, those different shade trees can also provide other income streams to the producers. And that's really, really important, because being reliant on one kind of international supply chain can make producers even more vulnerable. So there's a huge amount that happens there to support producers to trade into their local economy or into other supply chains. And we've got numerous examples of that from co-op sourcing. Simon, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think you've answered it very well, Emily. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Rob Purves, you've got your hand up. My colleague should hopefully give you the ability to unmute yourself in a moment if you want to come on and ask your question.
Hello. Hi. Sorry, girls. I just want to speak to Simon about this, but obviously, Simon, you're not as good looking as the other girls, but
it's true.
It's because of your business and your Italian business. Why did you decide to work with the Co-op? And on this, was it something that the Co-op decided, or did you as a company put it out to say we can do this?
It was a meeting of minds. As I said earlier, ECAM is a family-run business, and we've always been very close to our producers. So it was a very easy thing for us to adapt to fair trade when the regulations came in, because we were already going out, sitting down with the farmers and working with them in the way that Emily explained fair trade works. So it was just very natural for us to work with the Co-op. And I mean, we have been delighted in the way that the fair trade message has been strengthened through the years with the Co-op. And could I just take a minute to answer another question that I saw about this? Because I know I saw someone said, why can't the cocoa in other Co-op products be fair trade? And the important thing to know is that it is. So whenever you buy a product in the Co-op, if you buy a chocolate biscuit, if you buy a chocolate chip cookie, if you buy a chocolate cake, the fair trade system has been involved in certifying the cocoa in that product. So I think that says something really good about the Co-op's commitment to fair trade. It's not just in the bars that we make that have the fair trade logo on, but it runs through the entire business, like the lettering in a stick of rock.
Fantastic, thank you. Really interesting question in my opinion here from Sam Ayres, and so thank you, Sam. Do many of the producers get to see the end product, the bars? Do they have the opportunity to taste it so they can know, the value that they're providing to consumers?
Emily, do you want to do that one?
Well, unfortunately, sorry, I was just trying to write in the chat. Unfortunately, for a lot of producers, unfortunately, they won't have tasted chocolate in some of the locations we're sourcing from. And I think it was a really interesting question around whether there's any additional production that's done in some of these countries, and sometimes that is happening. But unfortunately, for some producer communities, they've never seen the product that's being made. And had the opportunity to taste the chocolate. However, I mean, it's really, really interesting to producers to see what happens to their products. Yeah. I'm lucky enough, and I think Simon is too, to have visited producer communities all around the world. We always take our products with us. Yeah. Unfortunately, that means the chocolate can be quite melted, I'm afraid. But we take products back, we share them with the communities, they taste it, they see their pictures, because we have pictures on pack on some of our products. And we also show them examples of, the collateral we do in store or through our campaigns and things like that. And the sense of pride that we hear from producers when they see this and they taste the product, and when we share those stories back of, people like you on this call who are interested in their lives and how they are treated, is like really moving. So I'll be going out to Kenya actually in November, not to see cocoa, but to see coffee and flowers and water programs. But I will be taking products with me. We'll be talking to the producers there about Fairtrade Fortnight, what we've been doing. It really makes a difference. They love to hear your feedback. So
yeah, true. I've done what Emily said. I remember going on a trip to the Dominican Republic with Brad, who was Emily's predecessor, and we took bars of chocolate with us and we handed them out to the kids. And it was the first time they tried chocolate. And honestly, the smile on a child's face when they try chocolate for the first time is amazing. So it really is. It really does make you feel you're doing something right.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I've just got one more question that came through the chat that I don't think we've picked up yet. So this one came from Pete. Simon, I think this might be for you. So you mentioned some bars are dairy free, but there is a milk allergy warning on the wrapper. Are there any others that may be?
So in our factory, we have separate manufacturing lines for dark chocolate and milk chocolate. But the very last bit where the liquid chocolate goes into the molds through the depositor, that is shared. Because of that, it means we cannot clean our system down to the point where we can make a dairy-free claim. So every supermarket has its own requirements to make a dairy-free claim, and we would never want to make a claim that we couldn't substantiate. So if people are really, really sensitive to dairy ingredients, unfortunately, that's why we have to put the may contain thing on our wrappers. We are investing in the factory at the moment, and I hope at some point we'll have completely separate lines, and then we will be able to do away with the may contain thing. But at the moment, we're very conservative, small c company, so we put that on just in case anyone has a real sensitivity to dairy. We don't want anyone to suffer as a result.
Thank you, Simon. That's interesting. Emily, I can see there's a bit of chat going on in the chat. Did you want to come on and sort of talk to that?
Yeah, of course. So I get this question quite a lot. So the question was, why do we have certain products that contain cocoa as an ingredient that don't have the Fairtrade logo on pack? So like I said in the chat, in 2017, we were the first retailer to convert all of the cocoa that we use as an ingredient to be sourced on Fairtrade terms. We didn't actually then launch and move to label those products until many years later. So we only started that process in 2019. So from 2017 to 2019, we didn't actually label any of those products. We've now in the process of labeling those products, but that's as they go through our normal kind of range review process. So the vast majority are now labeled, or if they're not, they will be soon. But the difference is, so on a product like this, if this was it's blurring, but you have the all that can be mark. So on our block chocolate, all of our chocolate confectionery products are all that can be fair trade, which means that all of the ingredients that are available as fair trade within those products will be sourced on fair trade terms. So we're talking about sugar, vanilla, cocoa. Where we use cocoa as an ingredient, we use the Fairtrade sourced ingredient mark. And so that just tells you that the cocoa in that product is sourced as Fairtrade. Now, there are some very small minority of products which have such a small amount of cocoa in them that the costs involved to convert to fair trade in those products doesn't outweigh the benefit that we can do. So actually what Co-op does there is since 2017, we've funded the Women's School of Leadership. So we compensate for that small amount of cocoa in a very minority of products, and we compensate for that by funding the Women's School of Leadership, which is the programme I talked about earlier. And that's about addressing some of those wider issues of gender inequality and confidence and business skills in female cocoa farmers, and is having a much bigger impact. So yeah, that's to just explain the FSI mark, all that can be, and our cocoa approach.
Fantastic, mega interesting. Thank you, and thank you both so much. That is it for our questions. We've not had any late ones come through, and it is 7:13. So with that, I think we will call this event to a close. Big thank you, Emily and Simon. I have learned so much. I absolutely need to just go and eat some chocolate right now, though. Thank you all members for joining and learning more about fair trade, the impact it makes, and the impact you all make by choosing fair trade. So please continue to do that. And yeah, as we will share the recording towards the end of this week, you'll get that by email, so do watch it back. Thank you. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Take care.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.